Morning folks, Dave Canterbury with the Pathfinder School. What I thought we'd do this morning is continue on with our fire series. We've talked about primitive fire. We're going to discuss that a little bit more today, as in the bow drill. We talked a little bit about char and charring materials, and then we showed a little bit about ignition by flint and steel of those type fires, or that type material. We're going to continue today to talk a little bit more about that. I want to show you some different types of steels that can be used other than your knife to strike sparks, to ignite charred material. And then I want to talk about some advantages and disadvantages of different types of strikers. And I want to show you a multifunctional striker or two that may open your eyes to some options for your kit that you hadn't thought of yet. Stay with me. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about Flint Strikers. We're going to go back and revisit again with the bow drill and talk about handholds as well, because some of these are combination type tools that I think are very useful. Now, understanding that really all we need is our knife, if it's high carbon steel, to drive sparks to charred material. We talked about that yesterday, and we can get plenty of sparks off of our knife. As long as our knife is high carbon steel, we can get the sparks that we need off of that knife to affect ignition. But understand that it may not be the most optimum choice for you depending on conditions. I'm a big believer in making sure that every tool we have is multifunctional in nature. That is one of the reasons that I haven't always just carried a Flint Striker in my fire kit, because I've always figured that the knife will do that job, or should do that job, fairly well. And I carry Flint Strikers and things like that in some of my teaching kits, more primitive kits and things like that when I'm out doing, historical type trekking and things like that. But as a general rule, I don't carry a Flint Striker with me. Now, with that said, if you could have a Flint Striker that would be multifunctional, and when I say multifunctional, I mean it has to perform 3 tasks in passable fashion. Everything that I carry needs to do that. If it's an extra piece of gear. Obviously, if a ferro rod will make fire, that fire has a lot of things that it can do for me. We've talked about that in past videos. But to carry a Flint Striker means I'm carrying another tool to make fire with sparks above and beyond a ferrocerium rod. And as long as I've got a good knife with a 90-degree spine that will drive material off my ferrocerium rod, I really don't need anything else. This is backing up and not going forward type of thing. If I carry a Bic lighter, if I carry a magnifying glass, and I carry that good heavy-duty ferrocerium rod, I should have everything I need. But going back to our progression of fire, we first talked about the bow drill set. And this is the bow drill set that we used in those videos. And the hardest thing to reproduce with a bow drill set is the bearing block. 90% of failures that I see with bow drill sets at my school during classes are because the bearing block is not correct, or the bearing block shoulders out before the person gets the ember. And that goes back to trying to get it right the first time, because once you start to burn into this bearing block, it's going to start shouldering your spindle out very quickly. And what I mean by that is it tends to rub the spindle and cause friction here, which reduces the amount of friction down here, and also makes it more difficult for this spindle to turn, causing more work on you to push the bow to rotate the spindle. There are a lot of companies out there that make a bearing block hole in their knife handles, and I've experimented with those quite a bit, and the problem with most of them is they're pretty awkward to handle. Most of the time you have to have the knife out of the sheath, which means you've got an exposed blade, which is not a good thing to begin with, or they're very awkward if they're in the sheath to try to operate as a bearing block. And then even with micarta or wood, they're going to wear it down with time very quickly. Now, I've also seen lots of guys put a bearing race of some kind, either from a skateboard wheel or something like that, buried into a block of wood, buried into a piece of bone, but then again you have a one-purpose tool. If you want something that's multifunctional, you need to have that bearing block do more than just be a bearing block. And on the knife, it's a good idea, because if you have a high carbon steel knife that you can strike flint off of, it's got a good 90-degree spine that you can drive material off the ferrocerium rod, and you have the bearing block for a bow drill fire, you have a really nice 3-in-1 tool there for making 3 different types of fire. My opinion of those bearing block holes in knife handles is they're not very safe, and they're not very comfortable, and they do wear over time, because generally speaking they are a material. Whether it's micarta, whether it's linen, whether it is G10 or whether it is wood, it's going to wear with time if you use it very often. Now, if you're using it for a one-time emergency, maybe that's a different story. But if you're going to use it over and over again, or you have to use it 5 or 6 times in an emergency because you don't get your fire right the first time, it may change the game a little bit. A regular Flint Striker looks like these, and these are 18th century reproductions. Here's one that's got kind of a dragon head on it. And this is the regular C-shaped striker that we sell on our website. And all of these are high carbon steel. All of these have been heat treated to throw sparks well. I'm really impressed with the way this one throws sparks that we carry on our website. It's just a laser cut piece of metal that's been heat treated in a furnace, and it works really, really well. So for a non-hand forged, cheapy striker to practice with or carry in your kit, it's a good option. What I want to look at is I want to look at a couple of improvements to strikers. This one is the SE Rowan that I showed in a past video. And it's set up to do a couple things. Number one, it's set up to be a bearing block, which is not going to wear away. So it's going to polish the top of that spindle, and you're never going to get that friction in the top. It's also meant to be a Flint Striker for making sparks. And I believe that the intent with this design was to have a good 90-degree spine so that it could also be used to strike a rod. Now, I've used this a couple of times. It heats up pretty bad. I'm not real impressed with the amount of sparks that it drives off of a ferrocerium rod because the edge is not quite hard enough. So I told Jeff Randall I was going to rip this off basically, and I was going to design my own, and he was fine with that. So what we've come up with at the Pathfinder school, and again, this is a prototype. These are not for sale yet, but it's in the shape of an arrowhead like the Pathfinder logo. It has a divot. It has really hard 90-degree spines on it, and it's been fire hardened to throw sparks as well. We've got this divot in here, and it's a little bit deeper than the SE Rowan is. Not much, just a little bit. Pretty close to the same dimension there. We made it wider so that it doesn't heat up as bad. So you've got a larger heat sink here. And because it's wider, it spreads your hands out a little bit more. And for me, makes it more comfortable depending on how you want to hold it. This is a pretty comfortable hold with your 2 fingers right there in the slot of that arrowhead. Just like this. It's a pretty comfortable hold that way. It doesn't seem to heat up on me very bad either, and I like that. We were really careful to put a really hard 90-degree spine on this thing so that it would throw a lot of sparks. And you can see the difference between this and this. This is just kind of rounding off a little bit because it doesn't have that hard edge. I'm not so sure that this was designed to ever do this anyway, but I thought if it's going to be a striker and a bearing block, it really needs to be a striker for a ferro rod as well. That way I get 3 bangs for my buck. I get 3 multi-functions for this item. And it can be worn as a pendant if you wanted to, or put in your kit. I carry mine in my fire kit. So what I want to do is I want to show you the difference that it makes using something like this as a bearing block versus something like this. Pretty effortless with that, to be honest with you. You can see the burn you're getting with that. What I wanted to try to do is get you guys a good kind of a bird's eye view of what's going on here. And I think I'm going to try a little trick here. I think I'm going to try to get this fireboard facing forward so you guys can actually see this notch and see how things are reacting and see how that coal is being formed up close. But to do that, I'm going to have to figure out a different way to put my foot on this board so that we're not getting one side of it stuck up in the air. I think that'll probably do it right there. You guys ought to be able to see that, I would think. See by zooming this camera in a little bit more. Okay. Now if I can keep from hitting the camera tripod, I'll have to move this just a little bit. Trying to see all the little shadows here while I'm doing this. Spindle's getting pretty short. Okay. See if we can twirl up an ember here. So remember what I said. The first thing we're looking for is downward pressure and smoke. We've got that. Now, we're looking for that notch to get full of material. And we've just about got that. Once that happens, then we can speed up. All right, there we go. Folks, I'm Dave Canterbury with Pathfinder School, and I promised a young man in Lake Okeechobee, Florida, I would send him this bow drill set. So I'm not going to use it anymore in this series. If we need to make another bow drill fire, I'll just make another set. And we'll go from there. I'm not sure if this video is going to go up tonight or tomorrow, but please remember that tomorrow is National Autism Awareness Day, and if your family's been touched by autism, you understand where I'm coming from. If not, please go to autismspeaks.org and support those families who have been touched by autism. I'm Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School. I thank you for your views. I thank you for your support. I'll be back in another video as soon as I can.